Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. This past week saw tariff disputes, USDA reports, and extreme weather across America's heartland. In spite of all of that, America's farmers are preparing for planting. To that end, we get the chance now to check in with Chris Chin. She serves as the director of Missouri's Department of Agriculture. Chris, thank you so much for joining us this week.
It's an honor to be here. We appreciate you getting an update on Missouri agriculture.
Well, and Missouri agriculture, I understand it took a hit last week from the extreme weather, the flooding, particularly across the Boot Heel. Chris, fill us in. What does the damage look like in that part of your state?
Well, right now, many areas of the Boot Heel are still underwater from the flooding that we've had recently because of the high volume of rain. And the Boot Heel was also victim to some tornadoes right before the flooding happened. And so while the farmers were trying to clean up from the tornado damage, now we've got flooding on top of it. But they weren't alone. We had other areas in the state that got hit with tornadoes as well, central Missouri, southwest Missouri. So Missouri agriculture has had a blow, but our farmers are resilient. They're going to continue to keep moving forward because that's what farmers do.
Well, and there's never a good time for a flood or tornado, but as farmers are gearing up for that crucial key spring planting season, Chris, it's extra tough. How does the state of Missouri look as planting gets closer?
Well, as everyone knows, the Boot Heel area of our state plants a lot earlier than the rest of the state. So there had been a lot of crops that have been put in the ground, some corn and some rice specifically. But up in the central part of the state near Saline and Lafayette County, we also had a lot of planters rolling in the fields as well. So we have been started in our planting rotations right now, but the weather that we've had, this cold weather, it's going to have an impact. We got to wait for it to warm up. We need some wind to dry out from all the rains that we've received, which were very welcome because many areas of our state were experiencing a drought before the rains that we had this last week.
All right, so you get the blessing of the moisture, but now we've got to grapple with that moisture and the slowdown it could put on Missouri farmers. But of course, Chris, Missouri is a very diverse state when it comes to agriculture, not just row crops. You also have a very, very strong beef cattle industry. And I understand there is some really exciting news for cattle producers in your state. Can you fill us in on the packing plant that's coming to Missouri?
Yeah, we're really excited. American Heartland Packing is scheduled to open this month just west of St. Louis on Highway I-70. So we're really excited about that opportunity to add more value to the farms that we have here in the state of Missouri. Not only is it going to help our beef industry in the state of Missouri, it's also going to have an impact on the grain industry because as more cattle are retained in the state of Missouri to be fed out, we're going to need more grain to help feed them. It's also going to have a trickle-down impact to all of our rural communities because there's going to be more supplies that are needed to be purchased at the farm supply stores. We're going to have more veterinarians that are going to be needed to help care for these animals. So we're really excited about the opportunity to add more value to Missouri agriculture and to help be the backbone of our rural communities in the state of Missouri.
And I heard you say we're going to retain cattle in Missouri. Chris, that is so huge. You grow a lot of calves in that state, but they've always left to be finished and processed elsewhere. This is part of an initiative to keep those cattle here at home, isn't it?
It is. We've been working for years to try and find ways to add more value to the beef industry in the state of Missouri. And this has been an initiative that started under Governor Parson, and Governor Kehoe was very much a part of this. He's helped us every step of the way, try and find ways to add more value to Missouri agriculture, especially on the beef industry. So we're excited about this opportunity. We think it's going to help bring that next generation back home to the family farm or ranch. And we're excited to see what the future holds for the Missouri agriculture industry with the addition of this plant opening up this month.
That is fantastic. Hopefully, like you say, this provides an opportunity for Missouri cattle producers to bring that next generation home, to keep that value there on their farms and ranches. Chris Chin, Director of the Missouri Department of Agriculture, thank you as always for sharing your insight with us here this week.
Thank you.
Our market segment this week is brought to you by Farm Futures. Stay up to speed on these volatile commodity markets at farmfutures.com. This past week saw plenty of headlines. We had a USDA report out, we saw additional tariff negotiations and extreme weather. Maybe it was too many headlines for an industry. We're going to take a step back for this market segment. Darren Newsom, Senior Market Advisor at Bar Chart, is joining us. Darren, thanks so much for taking the time.
I appreciate you having me on again, Mike.
What I want to do this week is zoom us out a little bit, go big picture. Let's assume President Trump is serious with these tariffs on getting manufacturing back in the United States, and they're still in place in a year, Darren. If that's the case, what do we need to be adjusting as an industry as you look out through 2025?
Yeah, it's an interesting way of phrasing the question because yeah, I don't think I have serious doubts about the manufacturing coming back. So I think we're going to have to make our plans, accordingly. So it's a global market. I can always go back to to Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. The times have changed. I mean, we have to adjust to where we are today, and it's not isolationism, it's not these sorts of things. It's a global market. So I think as an industry, both manufacturing, ag, whatever we want to look at, we have to accept the fact that it's a global market, and we have to try to make what we have work in that global in that dynamic. So we could say all we want that we're not going to import anything, we're not going to export anything, everyone's going to pay us to do this, that, and everything else. We're going to bring all the jobs back in here. But, we all know from a business point of view that these manufacturing companies are still going to do whatever benefits their bottom line the most. And that doesn't necessarily mean bringing all jobs back to the United States.
That's true. That's true. And that time will tell as to how much actual movement we get on that issue. But Darren, as I look at agriculture, particularly the broadacre row crop commodities that we trade on the futures markets in Chicago, my goodness, it seems like that is an industry that over the last 30 years has really become oriented for export. If that's not the main focus, where do we go for demand?
Well, that's the problem. So, as we look at what's going on, the U.S. is taking itself out of the demand game, the global demand game. We've already seen what it can do to soybeans. Back in 2018, the U.S. moved from being one of the big three players to a secondary player in the market. So now the concern is, okay, we've never been, well, we haven't been for quite some time, a major player in wheat. So that's really not an issue. But corn is an important market here for the U.S. We grow more corn and everything else than anybody else. But now let's say our biggest customer, Mexico, gets fed up with this. And we know that Brazil is planning on, if it hasn't already, increasing its production. So, all of a sudden, our largest customer could look to the south rather than to the north for some of its supplies.
And Darren, I mean, realistically, that's going to raise costs for Mexico. That's going to make it harder for Mexican livestock producers to function, but that may just be the added cost in this new environment. Is that your take?
It is a take, because again, what is added cost? I mean, added cost is hitting us from every angle. I mean, everyone's got tariffs, everyone's putting tariffs on. So costs are going up. And if this happens, if this plays out, if Brazil becomes a bigger player in the corn market, the U.S., you ask what we could do. The U.S. ag industry is going to have to find a way to increase its domestic demand. And right now, we've heard all of these things, but none of it ever comes to pass. None of it ever becomes reality. So if we don't have a big increase in domestic demand and we cut ourselves out of the global game, I don't know what we do. I don't know where we turn next.
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to take a break, but we'll be back with more from Darren Newsom, Senior Market Analyst at Barchart. Our market segment this week is brought to you by Farm Futures. Stay up to speed with these volatile commodity markets at farmfutures.com. Joining us this week to discuss the news happening in the world of agriculture is Darren Newsom, Senior Market Advisor with Barchart. Darren, before we went to break, you talked about how production has changed in Brazil. I think a lot of times we in America think we're the only ones who can grow these crops. What have we seen in soybean and cotton production out of Brazil in recent years?
Yeah, particularly in the soybean market, we've just seen exponential growth. I mean, every year it seems like we're talking about, weather permitting, we're talking about Brazil with another record crop. And, the difference in exports from Brazil and the United States, and this is worldwide, not just to China, but globally, back in, I want to say at the end of the 2016-17 marketing year, the U.S. and Brazil were basically on even terms when it came to exports. Now, as we make our way through the 2024-25, the U.S. is expected to export, even with its increase this year, less than half of what Brazil is projected to export. So, I mean, we've lost the status. Brazil continues to increase its production. Again, all it would take would be a couple years of weather problems, but you can't bank on that. So, until that happens, the U.S.'s role is just going to continue to diminish, and I would expect Brazilian production to continue to go up.
As you look around the world, as we look at China, we look at the EU, we look at some of the targets of these tariff actions, looking for new suppliers of grain. Darren, Brazil stands out. We've seen their acreage expand quite a bit. Are there other places around the country that could be gobbling up America's market share in some of these export commodities?
There's going to be a lot of countries lining up to do this. Even some of the islands just populated by penguins that recently had tariffs put on them. But certainly there's going to be other candidates. South Africa has often tried to step up. Certainly, Australia is a potential where we could see some growth. The key issue here is that these markets, these crops, will revert back to their core of being weather derivatives. So, a lot of these areas still have adverse weather. For the most part, Brazilian weather is beneficial, or it helps its production. Again, there can be some hiccups now and then, but there can be some hiccups in the U.S. as well.
Oh, that's true. Darren, before we let you go, let's take our focus off the grain markets briefly. Let's look at the cattle markets. We have been 3 years in repeated record territory for the cattle market. It's pulled back recently. Is this export driven or is this economic driven, this cattle pullback?
I think it's economic driven. I think there is a risk of exports, obviously. There's also a risk of domestic demand, consumer demand going down. So I think as we move forward here in April, and we continue to see what could happen in the U.S. stock indexes, if this creates some sort of economic upheaval, that so far it looks like it's going to, then it's going to come down how long will U.S. consumers continue to want to buy beef, particularly as we move into growing season. So I think it's going to be a real test. Right now, we've got a divergence between fundamentals and the non-commercial or the fund side. And usually that falls back in favor of the fundamentals, which are still bullish, but doesn't necessarily have to.
All right, fundamentals are still bullish as of this year. We're heading into planting season. We've got lots of uncertainty ahead of us. There's no doubt about that. Darren Newsom, always appreciate your insights, and certainly we'll be looking forward to your guidance as this new era in U.S. ag trade moves forward.
I really appreciate that, Mike.
Agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Greg Solier is keeping an eye on the sky for us as always. And Greg, how do things look out in the Pacific Northwest this next week?
The continuation of a pretty quiet weather pattern, really not only there, but across the heartland too. We'll get to that here in the next couple of minutes, allowing for some of those swollen and flooded out streams and rivers and farmland areas too, from the Ohio, really the I-70 corridor on southward to continue to drain and firm. Still probably multi-week setup there. Meanwhile, weak weather system offshore here. High pressure otherwise can control across much of the northern and central plains. A wee bit on the cool side, and boy, it was cold in some of those fields as far south as the I-70 and Ohio River over the past week, down into the upper 20s and low 30s there. But in the Pacific Northwest, yeah, nothing much going on. A little boundary here, a couple of snowflakes along the front range of the Rockies, and that is it. This system holds offshore in the Pacific Northwest. Otherwise, it's a northwest to southeast fast-moving dry flow, of which provides opportunities for outdoor work. Willamette Valley, Rogue River Basin, mild environs, the northern extent of that summer ridge, if you will, into parts of the central Rockies. And here's a warm front of the move across the Plain States areas. The recent snow has helped across the Dakotas and southern Canadian prairie, so drought conditions modestly improving there, but more moisture is needed. A little weak system offshore. That marine layer air may work into parts of southern California around San Diego with a sprinkle. Other than that, warm high pressure across the Four Corners area beginning to tap in to the runoff, and the snow melt across the southern Rockies, which was a disappointing season. Quiet weather pattern across much of the plains coming off recent moisture over eastern and southeastern Oklahoma and Texas, and still high and dry and drought ridden as you move into the western parts of the Plain States areas. A little change. Systems kind of backing up as the warm hot ridge establishes itself over the southwestern states. High and dry weather across the plains. Desert southwest heat into the valleys of California as well. Early summertime in that particular part of the country.
Across the central part of the United States, Greg, a chance for sunshine in this next week.
Yeah, a fair amount of it. No major weather systems on the maps and charts. Still have another push of some cooler air, not quite the degree of cold that sent readings down into the upper teens and mid-20s as far south as the Midwest. Probably a little nip on some of those budding and flowering trees out across sections of the Midwest. A couple of sprinkles and snowflakes up towards the Sioux, but no major systems. This trough, by the way, will begin to lift on out. Upper level winds begin to build on northward. It's a ridge up aloft, and so with that, a warm front, sprinkle and a snowflake into the northern plains, and that's it. High and dry weather allowing for, again, the flooding to ease on down across sections of the southern Corn Belt, Ohio Valley, and points on southward. Meanwhile, on the southern plains, the last of this particular weather system moving on by, a couple of scattered showers and thunderstorms. Again, focus where the grounds are overtly wet, but light moisture amounts are expected. 15 inches the past couple of weeks in this particular corridor, and wet as it can be into the Delta. Probably the need for some replanting as well in some of those southern sections of the far southern Corn Belt, lower Mississippi Valley, and deep south. Otherwise, high pressure control for the mid to late portions of the week. Maybe some 90-degree air west Texas into the desert southwest as well. Little going on other than a couple of sprinkles towards the Ozarks. So again, better outdoor work and maybe in some areas some field work and planting across the northwestern and western Corn Belt.
All right, Greg, what's the crystal ball show for the eastern third of the United States next
one
week?
more little system and into the southeastern parts of Canada. It's an early spring storm system, but quickly moving on by. The trough moving through the eastern part of the Corn Belt. Colder air on the move, but not quite the cold that we had here, though, over the past week, but still some frost and freeze potential, probably northern Corn Belt. Not unusual for this April calendar date. Meanwhile, a chill in the air for the northeast of New England. Cool weather across the Ohio Valley. High and dry weather with sunshine needed in this corridor. Otherwise, a couple of sprinkles on a warm front, windy, drier weather across the western and northwestern sections of the Corn Belt. Again, expectations, as we have been talking about, better and faster planting here, lesser as the season wears on over the eastern Corn Belt. That will be the wetter trend here in the days and weeks to come. Southeastern states, a couple of showers and thunderstorms across the areas of the Gulf Coast into the mid-Atlantic region. Nice to see recent rain here, easing and winding down the fire situation. More is needed, but there should be at least modest drought improvement in this particular corridor. More rain needed down through Florida. Cooler, drier weather, much needed. Lower Mississippi Valley, Delta region on the move. And other than a weak weather system across the Red River Valley of the South, high, dry pressure across areas of the southeastern states. A couple of showers and thunderstorms. Orlando on southward. Milder weather across much of the deep south.
Closed captioning this week is brought to you by Farm Progress. Their team of experts reports on innovative solutions and essential information for your farm business. Visit farmprogress.com to stay updated. For the past several weeks, the focus in Washington, D.C. has been on trade and tariff policy. But out in farm country, major commodity groups are still advocating for a new farm bill. Recently, I had the chance to talk with Tim Lust, who serves as CEO of the National Sorghum Producers, about what they're looking for in this next farm bill.
We've had a couple of starts and stops on the farm bill process, been around a long time, so we've seen this before, but the uncertainty that is there, we appreciate the ad hoc disasters and the economic assistance, but it's no way to run an operation. The underpinning of a long-term farm policy is so critical, so we're focused 2025, we've got a lot of leaders in key roles in Congress, leadership down at USDA that's committed to help try to find a way forward with the farm bill. If it was easy, it'd have been done 2 years ago, but we're going to get there.
From the sorghum grower's perspective, is there anything you think needs to be in the bill this year? What are you pushing for?
I think the key thing for us is just more safety in the safety net. Analogy one of our leaders used a couple of years ago is it feels like the safety net's about 2 inches off the cement and I'm falling from 30 feet. So we just need higher reference prices, some more support there to be able to be in line with the cost of production today and the realities of our costs.
Absolutely. It has to make sense for producers of today.
Has to make sense.
Tim, I know that sorghum is a widely exported crop. You've got buyers around the globe for the grain that's produced here in the United States. From a trade perspective, what are you watching over 2025? What are some concerns that the association has?
Well, it's no secret that about half of our crops exported and 92% of that has gone to China historically. So certainly challenges there, working on new markets. We've put a lot of effort into India the last year and hopeful for what that is. Another one of those tough markets to get into, but lots of proper opportunities there. And when we look at Southeast Asia, certainly some opportunities in other countries in Southeast Asia.
Some chances to maybe broaden that basket of foreign buyers.
Absolutely, something that's very important for us.
Let's talk disasters. We've seen several, both economic and natural disasters over the past couple of years. For sorghum growers, what do you want to see, or what do you hope gets done for disaster relief funding?
Rain. But if we can't get that, then I think it's just that certainty in the programs. Obviously, Congress has passed dollars, but getting those out in a timely manner, working through the devil in the detail of disaster programs. There's always technical issues that have to be done. And certainly with the transition, change in administration, they don't have all their full staffing there. So, just want to continue to work through the process and make sure that dollars get to the country and growers can farm for another year.
Thank you, Tim, for the update. And folks, sorghum producers aren't the only ones looking to see a new farm bill in 2025 and hoping to build their domestic demand. Soybean growers are looking for the same. I had the chance to sit down with CEO of the United Soybean Board, Lucas Lynch, and Chair Philip Good recently to talk about what's ahead for the United Soybean Board in 2025.
First off, it's an honor to work for the 77 farmer leaders who volunteer their time. They come from across 31 states, and the United Soybean Board is farmer-funded, farmer-led, and farmer-directed, and I get to be the person in charge of helping manage the organization. And as we look ahead, Mike, there's no doubt, demand utilization is everything. That pull-through strategy, everything from our soybean meal and that as a feed element into our animal agriculture, poultry and pork are number one and number two clients, if you will. But ultimately, this domestic turns into international opportunities as well, working through partners like the United Soybean Export Council and making sure our products get into foreign markets.
That's so true. That demand is a concern. Now, Phil, we've got some trouble in farm economy right now. As you look out, what issues are you concerned with?
Well, as a farmer, I totally feel it, realize it, recognize it. It's, looking for efficiencies, seeing what we can do. We're facing high input costs, lower market prices. So when I think about sustainability, I care and I'm passionate about my soil, the dirt, about the production on my farm, but it's also about financial sustainability. So at the United Soybean Board, we're looking to create value for the U.S. farmer. And so we're doing that in many ways, looking at yield robbers on the supply side, but creating demand on the demand side. So demand is so important. Exports are important. Poultry is important as our number one consumer of U.S. soy, but so are, I'm passionate about feeding the world. And so with that, I'm looking to work with our partners and to try to sell and move either whole soybeans, soybean meal, or meat.
Lucas, can we get into a little more specifics? What initiatives are ahead in 2025 to help do that very thing?
The way that we add value to soybean meal is we feed that animal agriculture. Specific is we get behind our pork exports, and we work through our poultry exports through the USAPEAC partnership. That's U.S. Poultry and Egg Export Council. That's also the National Pork Board. As we work with and through partners like that, it helps us get those markets where we add a valued-added product in our meat supply, if you will, what we raise here in the United States. I think the other side of that is just our industrial uses. Everything from soy transportation into the tires to if you think about our sneakers to our industrial uses like asphalt. Probably a really exciting innovation that I'm proud of is the fact that farmers have developed a soy firefighting foam. And think about that. That's to replace something that's got forever chemicals, and now it's healthy for the environment, but it's also healthy for our firefighters. That's pretty exciting stuff. And all of that is about demand creation, but not forgetting at the end of the day, we feed animals, we feed people, and we fuel the world, and we're about making sure that we've got a great domestic supply right here at home.
Thanks to CEO Lucas Lynch and Chair of the United Soybean Board, Philip Good, for filling us in on their priorities as we look ahead to what could be a volatile year in 2025. Folks, we hope you'll stay with us. When This Week in Agribusiness returns, we'll check in with our friends from Nutrient Ag Solutions for another segment, Agronomy for Your Acres. Leave it here.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Earlier in the program, we heard from Missouri Director of Agriculture Chris Chin about the struggles faced by farmers in the southern part of the state. But now, let's go a little farther north for this week's Agronomy for Your Acres. Joining me from the north central part of Missouri is Tyler Richardson. He serves as a crop consultant with Nutrien Ag Solutions. And Tyler, how are conditions in the fields looking in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, Mike, so I'm standing here north of Brunswick, Missouri this morning. The temperature last night was 25 degrees. I'm standing here in a field of soybean stubble that was worked with a field cultivator 2 weeks ago. And the soil temperature this morning was 41 degrees as of about 30 minutes ago. We're coming off a cool and wet spell here the last 7 days, but when we look at the 2-week forecast, it's looking like we're going to have a lot of sunshine and some 60, 70 degree temperatures. So we're not too far from things getting kicked off here in my territory.
We're not too far, but it sounds like we are on a holding pattern, at least for the time being. Tyler, for farmers dealing with this downtime, how could they best maximize their use of not being able to be in the field?
Yeah, so, oftentimes whenever we look at the calendar and it says it's time to plant and we're sitting here on the sidelines, it's easy to hit the panic button. But oftentimes it's better to take a slow down to speed up approach. So what I mean by that is maximizing the use of our downtime, doing things like checking over the planter, making sure it's ready to go whenever we can get out in the field, reviewing our hybrid placement plan, knowing what hybrids are going on what farms, having the seed pallets labeled, and knowing what varieties we can go out there with good emergence and vigor scores to put out there in the forefront when we take off back in the field. And another thing is reviewing our chemical plans. A lot can change here in 2 weeks once the calendar hits April. So, we make plans in December, ensuring those plans are still accurate and that we don't need to make any changes to them to adjust to changing field conditions. All these things can help us be ready to roll and hit the ground running whenever we do get back in the field.
Once they get back in the field, they'll be putting those corn seeds in the ground and they want to get a high quality stand. Tyler, what should farmers be doing and making sure they get right to get that quality stand in their corn crop?
Yeah, so certainly here in Missouri, we typically get one good shot to establish a good corn crop. So just slowing down when we get in the field, periodically stopping and checking our soil depth, soil moisture, ensuring seed to soil contact in the fields that we're in, and making sure soil temperatures are right. A 50 serves as a baseline, but, I'd like to see 60 degrees plus in soil temperatures. That way we can get that crop out of the ground as soon as possible and up and going. All these factors can really help you set yourself up for success with a quality, high yield corn stand.
That's what it's all about. Tyler, if we've got viewers who want to learn more about what Nutrien Ag Solutions can bring to their fields this year, where would you send them for information?
NutrienAgSolutions.com.
Tyler Richardson, crop consultant with Nutrien Ag Solutions. Thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier returns now with his extended farm weather forecast for the country.
Earlier in the program, Greg Solier mentioned that it might be a mild weather week next week, Greg, but there's still a shot of precipitation. Is that right?
Yeah, in some areas, but certainly winding down and paling in comparison to some of the storms that have put upwards of a foot, almost a foot and a half of rain in some areas into the lower Ohio Valley points on southward. So little or none is music to the ears of the outdoor work and a producer across this section of the country. Yeah, early the week, 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch. This is welcome over the deep south and southeastern sections of the country. A little rain snow mix into the northeast of New England. There may be perhaps locally spotty up to a 1/4 inch into the northern and central plains middle part of the week. High and dry over the southwestern reaches of the country. 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch late in the week and the following weekend the Pacific Northwest. So Mike, a very quiet and largely dry weather pattern for much of the country.
What are you watching from a temperature perspective for the week of April 21st?
Now the warmth is on the move. The soil temperatures are recovering, and some 80-degree weather expected for a time. Once again, back in the western and southwestern Corn Belt, sections of the eastern complex as well. Good growth and development if you have even-keeled soil and moisture with this warmth over the southeastern part of the country, southwest too, and temperatures about normal over the northern 1/4 of the country. The cold air through the Canadian prairie. High and dry weather much needed in some of these areas into the Ozarks on southward. Still need more moisture western parts of the Corn Belt and Plains, but opportunities for outdoor work and field work getting going here. Normal precip up near the Canadian border. The only real active weather pattern is where we need the moisture over the southeastern states and parts of the northeast and New England.
Does that additional warmth stick around as the calendar flips to May?
Yeah, into the eastern and southern reaches of the country, but we get another trough moving on through, but the jet stream finally positioning on northward. So some of that 80-plus degree weather into parts of the south and southeastern Corn Belt into the eastern states. Snow melt will get going north of the St. Lawrence. Pushes slightly cooler air into the northern plains and sections of the Pacific Northwest. We'll welcome some moisture here, some late season snow, higher peaks of the Rockies, normal precip, but we'll take it over the northern and central plains. Severe weather potential for the I-70 corridor on southward, and return to wetter weather over the eastern Corn Belt, back to dry time in the southeast.
What are you watching for the week of May 5th to the 11th?
That warm to hot ridge, as we will be seeing here much of the remainder of the spring and summertime season, retrogrades or moves back to the west here, allowing for a push of some chillier air, maybe some frost potential to the far eastern Corn Belt as we move on through the first few days of the month of May, and the severe weather potential down across the southeastern states, but drier weather resumes for the western Corn Belt all the way westward towards the Pacific.
Our Farm Progress Update is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of highly effective and efficient high-speed discs and land rollers. Visit Brandt.ca for more. Across the country, Farm Progress editors are gearing up for springtime, even way up north in the Dakotas. Joining us this week is Sarah McNaughton-Peterson. She's the senior editor for Dakota Farmer Magazine. And Sarah, thanks for checking in with us this week.
Absolutely. Happy to come on, and it's always great to visit about some of the nice spring weather we're finally having up north.
Well, and so I understand it is getting to be a little springy. Is mud a concern in the Dakotas already this time of year?
Yeah, mud is always a concern. We talk about winter, spring, and mud season we have up here, especially when it's calving season, especially in some of our horse pens. We've got still have our tall muck boots on, and there's still a lot of water and that residual snow hanging around, but the temps are going up, and we had 5 inches of snow last week up here, so that'll help with the soil moisture for the spring. But we're just ready for summer and planting season to get started around here.
I think you and everybody else is ready to get in the fields and get things running. Now, you recently did a bit of a deep dive into the biofuels industry. Sarah, can you fill us in on what you've recently written on Dakota Farmer about how that industry looks in your part of the world?
Absolutely. So it featured Ryan Peterson, who's a farmer from North Dakota, and Scott McFeeters, who's a farmer from Nebraska in that story. And they kind of talked about two different things that they each do in the biofuels industry. Peterson's been a lot more involved with using biofuels on his operation, and Scott McFeeters is a lot more involved producing those biofuels and kind of promoting those markets. And especially with all the contention stuff going on with foreign markets, it's really great to see a growing opportunity here in the Dakotas to bring those biofuels and those crops to a market locally in the state.
Absolutely. It's a great way to add value right here in the United States and sell that additional product to Americans. That is fantastic news. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like there was optimism that the growth could continue, Sarah, in the Dakotas?
Absolutely. There's always new processing plants. I think everybody on the administrations here in the Dakotas are really great at wanting to create more local markets for producers. And so I think that's just going to be something that continues to grow here more and more.
Man, lots to watch. And of course, Dakota Farmer Magazine features lots of advice for folks in your part of the world. And I know we were talking about mud earlier. You've got a story on keeping your horses out of the mud, don't you, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. So my co-host for the FPNX podcast and I write kind of some equine pieces every other month. And so Kurt wrote all about covering how to keep your horses up out of the mud. And I was reading that article through and thinking about what I was going to do in all of our horse pens and we're going to be scraping some pens with a bobcat and skid steer here coming up pretty quick to try to get those horses out of the mud.
Yeah, mud season certainly adds a little extra chores on every farm who's dealing with it. Sarah, speaking of farms up in North Dakota, when do you think farmers are going to start getting into the fields? Is it started already?
I think it really depends on the operation and kind of, the Dakotas is such a big geographical area with a lot of different soil moisture, a lot of different temperature and weather issues they're working through. I did see on Facebook a gentleman in southeast North Dakota was already tilling about a month ago. I saw that on Facebook. And then I think as the soil moisture and the soil temperatures warm up and kind of increase, we'll maybe see some people getting out in the field, but never too late for late season snowstorms. So
that's true. You are way up north, Sarah. As always, thank you so much for filling us in on what's new at Dakota Farmer, and we wish you luck this week.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Now on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. This weekend at the Tractor Shed, reflecting back on 30 years of enjoying this hobby of antique farm tractors and sharing stories with you. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Lundell Plastics. LundellPlastics.com is the site you want to check out to see the various poly products that those folks bring to the agriculture community to improve your efficiency out on the farm. LundellPlastics.com. Well, it's very fresh in my mind. It was 30 years ago this month that my mom and dad in southwestern Indiana had their farm auction, and I was the successful bidder of that tractor, which was delivered to a dealership in Indiana the same summer that I was delivered to a hospital 2 blocks away. And we've had a long ride together. I'll show you some of the shots we've enjoyed over the years, some of the places we've gone. Yeah, it was April of 1995, and we've been out there on tractor rides and plow days and fairs and festivals, celebrations of all kinds. Traveling across the country, I think that old tractor has been in or through about 13 states altogether. And it has formed for us some amazing friendships. That's the thing that I would say, I guess, urging you to get involved in this particular hobby of collecting and showing, displaying old tractors, because you'll meet some of the nicest people in the world. They are kind, they offer information. When you need parts, they have them. Collect an old tractor. You don't need 40 of them, you don't need 50 of them, just one, especially if there's one that matters much to you, like one that I've had as a part of my life for the past 30 years. Mark Stock sells all kinds of tractors, and many quite new ones too. We go to his report now from Big Iron Auctions.
Well, hello, Max. Land is still selling across the Midwest. On April the 15th, there'll be land selling in Schuyler County, Illinois. On April the 17th, there'll be land selling in Harrison County, Iowa. Also on the 17th, 316 acres of Nance County, Nebraska land will sell. Please check out all of the land selling on Sullivan Auctioneers and BigIron.com. April the 16th, a very large machinery sale will be conducted. Eden Family Farms, they are retiring. They're by O'Neill, Nebraska. They'll sell a Case IH 500T precision disc 30-foot air seeder, Thunder Creek fuel trailer, Case IH 255 Tigermate field cultivator, Case IH Magnum 340 CVT mechanical front tractor, a Case IH RMX 370 disc, Held Farm LLC from Geneva, Iowa. We'll sell a John Deere 9610 combine, John Deere 9400 four-wheel drive tractor, Elliott & Son Inc. from Hemmingford, Nebraska. We'll sell a John Deere 8270R and a John Deere 8400 mechanical front tractor. And a unique item, Max, getting a lot of attention is the Plainscraft Mountaineer Old West-style wagon for camping. There's something selling for everyone on Big Iron.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Geringoff. Check out the new XFR50 Draper with 3 times more flexibility than the closest competitor at Geringoff.com. Geringoff, proudly built in the American heartland. This week, we're getting to know Mary Schreiber. She serves as the Central Region Vice President for the National FFA Officer Team. And Mary, thanks for talking with us this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, I understand you didn't plan to get into FFA when all of this started. Can you tell us the story?
So I always joke that I sort of joined FFA by mistake, but I stayed on purpose. So I don't come from an agriculture background, but when I got to middle school and high school, I was voluntold to join FFA, and I started beekeeping. That was my hands-on work-based learning experience, competed in lots of competitions, attended conferences and conventions, and people suddenly didn't have to ask me to come back anymore because I just started showing up and I loved it so much.
What was it about the industry of agriculture that made you want to stay?
Honestly, it was the community, the people that really enveloped you in, whether you come from an agriculture background or not, and understanding eventually that this industry and this organization here in FFA was my home. And it's really the people that make the home what it is.
And so you got to spend this past year working with people from across the country on the National Officer Team. What have been some of the highlights for you?
This has been nothing short of incredible this entire year. We're about halfway through right now, and right now convention season's right underway. So we have state conventions happening all across the country. We kicked off some training earlier in the year after we got elected, and since then we've been hitting the ground running pretty crazy. So lots of corporate partner visits with some of those big FFA supporters, traveling across the country, learning more about the agriculture industry in all corners of the nation.
That is fantastic. Having a well-rounded idea of what it takes to make American agriculture work. Mary Schreiber, thank you so much for filling us in on your role with the National FFA Officer Team this week. Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by AGI, supporting your expertise with industry-leading grain handling, storage, conditioning, and monitoring solutions. AGI, we're right there with you. That weather is starting to warm up, which means that grass is starting to grow. Chad Colby always has a sharp-looking lawn, and that's because he uses the right tools. He joins us now with an update.
You're not wrong, Mike. Having the right tool makes all the difference in the world. For quite a few years now, more than 5, I would say, I've really kind of had a lot of cordless tools. They're just so easy, especially chainsaws and weed trimmers. And on this week's tech segment, I want to talk about weed trimmers because I made a pretty good upgrade this week. As you can see, Milwaukee's got a couple different models. One is that traditional one you see kind of on the bottom of the screen. That's a model that has 2 batteries, and all that'll be is a string trimmer. It can't do anything else. The model on the right, though, yes, it only has 1 battery, but it's part of their quick lock system. And they actually make 13 other accessories that just clip on the tool. Now, back at home, I've got the pole saw chainsaw adapter. I've got a hedge trimmer, and they work great, let me tell you. So as far as getting this machine ready to go, it was very, very easy. It took me just a few minutes. Mounted the guard on, as you can see right here in the handle, clipped it together, popped in a battery, and you're in business just as quick as that. But before I went out to use it, I wanted to kind of do a little side-by-side with the old one. And as you can see here, the one on the left is the new one. The one on the right is the older model. They've upgraded the trigger, and you can see visibly it's got some more cooling on it. This unit is 1.76 horsepower. That's considerably more than the old school weed eaters we used to have. And, gone are the days of smelly fuel and having one that's hard to start. You got full power here in less than a second, and they've got plenty of power, especially when you combine it with the new battery technology that's out. It's just, these things are so powerful today. And the best part is it fits right into that ecosystem I already had. So if you got a favorite power tool, be sure to check out some of the upgrades. It might be worth taking a look. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Lawn season is here. Thank you, Chad, for that update. And folks, don't go away. We'll be back with more after this. 2025 is a big year for America's wheat growing industry because it's this year that the National Association of Wheat Growers is celebrating 75 years in existence. Recently, I had the chance to sit down with Jamie Kress, NOG's treasurer, to talk about their celebration for the year.
We're very excited. Back in 1950, a handful of farmers got together. They realized a need to move policy and things that are important to the wheat industry. And we are really proud that 75 years later, we are here to celebrate our National Association of Wheat Growers. We are relevant, we are charging forward, watching out for the needs of farm families around the United States, and so we're very excited to be celebrating.
It is quite a celebration. Of course, you mentioned charging forward as an industry. That's the theme. You're looking ahead to 2025. From the National Association of Wheat Growers' perspectives, what issues are you watching over this next year? What's on the radar?
Farm Bill, just like so many other ag groups, Farm Bill is top of mind. In terms of our 75th anniversary, I really hope that we can celebrate this year with a Farm Bill. But there's obviously a lot of moving parts. We had the opportunity to have our president, Keith Felty, he testified in the Senate last month. We were honored to have that opportunity, and it was a great time for him to explain what's going on in the economic situation in farm country and for wheat specifically. We also have the House and the Senate continuing to move forward with hearings, so we're optimistic that they can continue to move forward and hopefully make some meaningful progress on the Farm Bill.
Because wheat growers, like so many corn commodity producers, have seen struggles in take-home pay over the last several years.
That's exactly right. Between 23 and 24, we saw a 43% drop in the net cash farm income. And that's real for the wheat industry. It's a very hard time. We have increased input prices, we have high interest rates, we're seeing lower prices for those commodities at the elevator. It's a really difficult time to navigate, and the Farm Bill would provide that certainty that we really need.
It would be nice to have that kind of, as you mentioned,
Right.
certainty. That's a perfect word for it. Now, you at the Commodity Classic this year, wheat growers brought a lot of folks up to Denver to the Commodity Classic. Why would you come to an event like this? What's the reason to get together?
You know, this is the largest farmer-led trade show convention in the United States, and so we're really proud to be part of it. This is a place for technology, for education, for networking. I see it as a continuing education opportunity for farmers. It's worth taking that time away from your farm to come and invest in yourself, invest in your business. And really, it's great to be here with all these people who do what we do.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And you mentioned investing in yourself, investing in your business. I've heard that's what membership in an association like the National Association of Wheat Growers can do. It's an investment in your business, isn't it?
Exactly. And I hear often, I don't know if I have time to be involved. I don't know if I'm the type of person who should be involved. And I'm here to tell you, if you farm, if you're involved in agriculture, your voice is needed. And it's needed in all the levels, it's needed in all the places. And it really makes you a more well-rounded, educated farmer to get out and to be engaged.
Happy birthday to the National Association of Wheat Growers. If you'd like to join, you can get more information at wheatworld.org. And thank you for joining us here today. Be sure to catch us next time for This Week in Agribusiness. This Week in Agribusiness is recorded in the Strauss Studios. For more than 70 years and 3 generations, Strauss has been manufacturing high-performance, German-engineered workwear, work boots, and safety equipment. Prepare for the next growing season at Strauss.com.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.